I always believed my life was meant for something bigger. I wanted to leave the small coastal town I grew up in, to chase my dreams and write my own story. But life has a cruel way of rewriting our plans. My name is Lily Bennett, and for as long as I can remember, I wanted to move to Seattle, to stand among the skyscrapers, to breathe in the energy of a city that never slept, and to find my place in a world that felt limitless. I spent my childhood sketching blueprints for cafes I'd one day own. I imagined filling them with books, laughter, and the aroma of fresh coffee. A quiet little haven in a bustling city. But dreams are fragile things. Last winter, everything I thought I could become slipped away. It started with the floods. Heavy rains pounded our small town in Oregon for weeks. Our family store, Bennett's Hardware, had stood on Main Street for 3 generations. It survived storms, recessions, and even my grandfather's clumsy attempts at modernizing. But this flood, it didn't spare us. I remember standing on the sidewalk watching the water rise over the glass doors, carrying years of memories away, like driftwood. When the waters receded, the damage was irreversible. Shelves warped, inventory ruined, the foundation cracked beyond repair. My father tried to stay strong for us, but I saw it in his eyes, defeat. Soon after the letters started coming, notices from the bank, red ink stamped across the envelopes like open wounds. Final warning, payment overdue. We were drowning even with the waters gone. At night, I lay awake in my childhood room staring at the ceiling. I still had my Seattle notebooks on the shelf, filled with doodles and half-written business plans. I thought about tearing them up, burning them even. But I couldn't. There was still a stubborn part of me that whispered, "You're not done yet, Lily." Then came the day everything changed. Dad came home later than usual. His clothes were damp from the rain, his face pale and his shoulders. They seemed smaller somehow, like the weight of the world had finally crushed him. "Lily," he said quietly, not meeting my eyes, we might have a way out of this mess." For a moment, hope flared in my chest. But then he told me the price. And in that instant, I knew the life I wanted had died. It's strange how one sentence can shatter the life you've built in your head. I thought my father was about to save us. Instead, he handed me over like I was part of the debt. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, rainwater dripping from his coat onto the worn hardwood floor. His hands, calloused from years of hard work, trembled as he held a crumpled envelope. "There's a man in Seattle," Dad began. His voice cracked, and I felt my stomach knot. "His name is Ted Carlson. He's willing to help us. He'll cover the debts, give us enough to rebuild the store, even the house." I wanted to feel relief. Instead, my chest tightened. "What's the catch?" I asked. My voice was sharper than I intended. Dad's eyes darted toward the window, as if the storm outside might offer him an answer. He wants you to marry his son." The words hit me harder than I expected. "Mary, are you serious?" I shot up from my chair, my palms pressing against the table so hard it hurt. "Lily, please," Mom whispered from across the room. She was clutching her rosary, her knuckles white. "Marry some stranger to save your store." "No, I'm not a bargaining chip." Dad flinched like I had struck him. "I wouldn't ask if there were any other way. I've tried, Lily. No bank will touch us. We're one step away from losing everything. This is the only chance we have." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. "Who is he?" I asked through gritted teeth. "His name is Ethan Carlson. He had an accident 2 years ago. A car crash. He's in a wheelchair now." I laughed bitterly. So let me guess he's rich disabled, and his father wants to unload him onto someone desperate enough to say yes. Stop it, Lily. Mom's voice cracked. Tears streamed down her face. We're not trying to ruin your life, but if we lose the house, we'll have nowhere to go. The kitchen felt smaller with every breath I took. In my mind, I saw the life I had imagined my own cafe in Seattle late nights, writing stories, laughter, with friends in a cozy apartment. Now it all felt like a cruel joke. I can't do this, I whispered, my voice breaking. You're asking me to give up everything. Dad's shoulders sagged. He looked 20 years older in that moment. I'm asking you to save us, Lily. To save the family. People always say there's a choice, but they don't tell you what to do when every option feels like a cage. I didn't answer that night. I stormed upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and cried until my throat ached. Through the walls, I could hear my parents' muffled voices, Mom sobbing, Dad's low, defeated tone. It hurt to listen, but I couldn't stop. All night, I stared at the ceiling, replaying his words in my mind. I'm asking you to save us, Lily. Save us. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. I was supposed to leave this town, to build my own life, not be traded away like a solution to someone else's problems. And yet, when I closed my eyes, I saw the house where I grew up, the creaky front porch, the walls stained with smoke from Mom's Sunday dinners. If we lost it, where would they go? By morning, my body felt heavy, like even gravity wanted me to give up. I walked downstairs to find them at the table, still in yesterday's clothes. Mom's rosary was clutched so tightly in her hands, I thought it might break. Dad didn't even look up when I entered. I'll do it. My voice came out small, but it filled the room like a gunshot. They both froze. I'll marry him, I said again, louder this time. If this is the only way, fine. Mom broke first. Her face crumpled as she reached for me, tears spilling freely. Oh, Lily, thank you. You're saving us. I let her hug me, but I didn't hug back. My arms stayed limp at my sides. Dad's voice cracked. You'll never regret this. One day, you'll understand. Don't I cut him off? Just don't say anything. Because if he did, I might break. I wanted to scream, to run, to tell them they were crushing the last pieces of who I was. But instead, I stood there in silence, letting their gratitude wash over me like cold rain. It wasn't the wedding I dreamed of as a little girl. There were no flowers, no music, no warm laughter echoing through the air, just a gray sky and a dress that didn't feel like mine. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing in front of a small courthouse in Seattle. The air was damp and cold, and even the cherry blossoms seemed to droop under the weight of the clouds. I smoothed the borrowed white dress over my hips, though no amount of adjusting could make it feel right. It wasn't tailored for me. Nothing about this day was. Inside a handful of people waited my parents, Ted Carlson, and a woman I assumed was his wife. They sat stiffly in the front row like attendees at a business meeting, not a wedding. Then I saw him. Ethan Carlson. He was sitting in a sleek black wheelchair, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was neatly combed back, and his eyes, an unreadable shade of storm gray, watched me without flinching. My pulse spiked. I thought he might smirk, or let some hint of bitterness show, but he didn't. Instead, he nodded once almost imperceptibly, like he was bracing himself too. The officiant cleared his throat. I barely heard the words as we went through the motions. Do you, Lily Bennett, take Ethan Carlson? I choked out a quiet, I do. When it was Ethan's turn, his voice was deep but steady. "I do. No fanfare. No kiss. Just a cold metal band sliding onto my finger. As the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Ethan extended his hand to me. It was firm but not forceful, his fingers warm against my cold skin. "Welcome to the family," Lily Ted said with a tight smile as we signed the papers. I didn't answer. My throat felt like sandpaper. I kept telling myself this wasn't permanent. It was a transaction, a deal. But as I glanced at Ethan, his stillness, his restraint, I wondered if he felt trapped too. That night I followed Ethan's assistant into the Hale mansion. It wasn't what I expected. From the outside, the house was beautiful in a cold, intimidating way. Stone walls, large glass windows, manicured gardens. The kind of place you'd see in a magazine admired from a distance, but never imagine living in. Inside, it felt empty. The marble floors echoed with every step. Chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, their crystals catching the dim light. There was no warmth, no smell of home cooking, or the creak of old wood underfoot. "This will be your room," the assistant said softly, leading me down a long corridor. It was huge, too huge. A king-sized bed, a sitting area with cream-colored chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the dark garden. Everything was perfect, perfectly lifeless. When she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my wedding dress. My suitcase sat unopened in the corner. I didn't cry. Not yet. A soft knock startled me. Yes, the door opened just a crack, and Ethan's voice carried through. "I won't come in. Just wanted to say, your things will be unpacked tomorrow, and you're free to settle in however you'd like." His tone was calm, deliberate. "Thank you," I said flatly. There was a pause. "Good night, Lily." "Good night." The door clicked shut. He didn't press. He didn't linger. And somehow, that made me more uneasy than if he had. The next morning I woke to the faint smell of coffee. On the small table by the window sat a steaming latte in a delicate porcelain cup. Next to it was a folded note. In neat, elegant handwriting it read, "Good morning. I thought you might like this. Feel free to join me in the sunroom later if you'd like to talk. If not, that's fine too. Ethan." I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't expected kindness. Not from a man who in my mind was as much a part of this transaction as I was. But this didn't feel like kindness. It felt like respect. I didn't touch the latte. I didn't want to owe him anything, not even gratitude for a cup of coffee. When I finally stepped out of the room, the mansion was eerily quiet. Staff members moved like shadows, avoiding eye contact. At the far end of the hallway, I caught a glimpse of Ethan. He was wheeling himself through a glass door into another wing of the house. He didn't see me. For a moment, I thought about calling out. Then I stopped myself. This wasn't my home, and he wasn't really my husband. Not yet. The days that followed felt like drifting through someone else's life. I was a guest in his house, and a stranger in his world. The first few days felt like drifting through someone else's life. The Hale mansion was magnificent, but it wasn't a home. Every hallway was lined with priceless art and heavy velvet curtains that seemed to swallow sound. The staff moved silently, their footsteps barely audible against the marble floors. Even the air smelled clean, in a way that felt unnatural, like a hotel no one ever really lived in. I tried to stay out of the way. Breakfast was served in a sunlit dining room with a table so long it could seat 20 people. Yet only 2 chairs were occupied, mine and Ethan's. He didn't force conversation. He didn't even look at me unless I spoke first. "Did you sleep well?" he asked on the second morning, his voice calm, measured. "Yes. Thank you." That was the end of it. After eating, he would wheel himself out of the room, heading toward the east wing. The first time, I didn't think much of it. But by the third morning, I noticed a pattern. Each day after breakfast, Ethan disappeared behind a set of tall double doors at the far end of the east corridor. The doors were always locked. One afternoon, as I wandered the halls, I stopped outside them. From inside, faint noises drifted out soft, whirring the occasional clang of metal, low voices speaking quickly. I pressed my ear to the wood, but couldn't make out the words. The staff offered no clues. Whenever I asked about the east wing, they would give me polite, rehearsed answers. "Mr. Hale works there during the day, ma'am. He prefers not to be disturbed." There was something in the way they said it quietly, with a hint of reverence, that made me more curious. What could he possibly be doing in there? A man like Ethan, who had the wealth to live comfortably for the rest of his life, didn't need to shut himself away for hours every day. But he did, and it gnawed at me. Maybe I shouldn't care. After all, this wasn't a real marriage. But the more I watched him vanish into that wing, the more I wanted to know what he was hiding. They say curiosity kills. But in this house, it was the only thing keeping me alive. There's something unsettling about a house that's too quiet. Every sound seemed magnified: the creak of a floorboard, the tick of the antique clock in the hallway, even the soft swish of my slippers against the polished wood. But the east wing, that was different. That part of the mansion felt alive in a way the rest didn't. I started noticing it on my second week there. Ethan would finish breakfast, give me a polite nod, and wheel himself down the east corridor. The staff never followed. No one even glanced in that direction. One morning I stood at the entrance of the corridor after he left. It was long, lined with old family portraits. Dust motes floated in the shafts of light, cutting through the curtains. At the far end were two tall doors made of dark oak, their brass handles gleaming. The moment he disappeared behind them, faint sounds began seeping through. A low hum, a soft metallic clang, voices quiet, rapid, and almost impossible to catch. I took a step closer. "Mrs. Hale." The voice startled me. I turned to see one of the housekeepers standing a few feet away holding a basket of linens. "Yes." She gave me a polite smile. "Would you like me to prepare tea in the sunroom?" "No. No, thank you." I walked away before she could say more. But the questions in my head didn't go anywhere. What was Ethan doing in there for hours, every day? It wasn't just paperwork. The sounds were too mechanical, too deliberate. And why the secrecy? If this marriage was supposed to be a partnership, even a transactional one, why did it feel like he was living an entirely separate life? That night, lying in bed, I thought back to the latte and handwritten note he left me on my first morning. Maybe I should have responded. Maybe I could have asked him about the East Wing. But a stubborn part of me didn't want to be the first to reach out. If he wanted me in his world, he'd have to invite me. But sometimes answers don't come from the person you expect. They slip out in whispers, if you know where to listen. The East Wing was like a locked puzzle I couldn't stop thinking about. Every morning after Ethan disappeared behind those tall oak doors, I found myself pacing the hallways restless. Once I lingered near the grand staircase and watched a young man in a crisp shirt and tie arrive at the mansion. He carried a sleek laptop bag and spoke in hushed tones to the butler before being ushered into the east corridor. An hour later, 2 more people arrived this time, a woman in glasses holding a thick folder, and another man rolling in what looked like a metal case on wheels. Whatever Ethan was doing in there, it wasn't small, but no one would say a word. Even the house staff, usually warm and accommodating, became tight-lipped when I asked. "Mr. Hale prefers privacy, ma'am," one of them said with a rehearsed smile. Privacy. That seemed to be the one thing Ethan had in abundance. But I wanted answers. Later that day, I found myself in the laundry room, where Mrs. Collins, the head housekeeper, was folding fresh linens. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and a soft voice. I liked her more than anyone else in the house. "Mrs. Collins," I began cautiously, leaning against the doorway. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, dear. It's about the East Wing. What does Ethan do there?" She paused, hands hovering over a stack of towels. For a moment I thought she'd brush me off like the others, but instead a faint smile tugged at her lips. "Mr. Hale works very hard, Mrs. Hale," she said softly. "He's creating things most people wouldn't believe possible." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Collins looked down at the towels, smoothing them with slow, deliberate movements. "It's not my place to explain. But I will say, this don't believe everything you've heard about him." Her words hung in the air like smoke. "What have you heard?" I asked, my voice quieter now. She glanced up, her eyes meeting mine. "That he's broken, that he's bitter, that he's wasting his life. But people only see what they want to see. They never imagine what's behind the closed doors." Before I could ask more, she turned back to her work. "Some things," she added gently, "are more precious because they grow in the dark." I left the laundry room with more questions than answers, but something inside me shifted. Maybe Ethan wasn't the man I assumed he was. And maybe I wasn't ready for what I'd find behind those doors. That evening, there was a knock at my door, and for the first time, Ethan asked to let me in, not just to the room, but to his world. That night, I couldn't sleep. Mrs. Collins's words kept replaying in my mind like a song stuck on loop. Some things are more precious because they grow in the dark. What did that even mean? I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my thoughts tangled. Ethan. Everything about him felt contradictory. He was distant, yet polite, reserved, yet not unkind. I kept telling myself I didn't care, that this was just a transaction, a debt paid with my name on a marriage certificate, but the truth. Somewhere deep down, I was curious. I wanted to know who he really was. The knock came just as I was drifting off. I sat up, startled. "Lily." It was Ethan's voice, low, measured. I hesitated before answering. "Yes, I don't want to intrude, but if you're awake, I'd like to show you something." My chest tightened. "Show me something." There was silence for a moment, as if he was giving me space to refuse. "Do I have to?" I asked instantly, regretting how defensive I sounded. "No," he said softly. "You don't have to do anything. It's entirely up to you." That answer threw me off. He wasn't demanding, not even persuasive, just waiting. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, staring at the door like it might bite me. "All right," I said finally. "Give me a minute." Outside, Ethan sat in his wheelchair, dressed in a dark sweater and slacks. He looked calm, though there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even vulnerability. "Are you sure?" he asked. I nodded. "Let's just get this over with." He didn't flinch at my tone. "Follow me," he said quietly. We moved through the silent corridors. The house felt different at night. Less imposing, more like a sleeping beast. As we approached the tall double doors of the east wing, I felt a strange mix of apprehension and excitement. Ethan stopped in front of them and glanced back at me. "You don't have to go further if you're not ready," he said. "Just open the doors." I replied, my voice tighter than I intended. He nodded once, then pressed a panel on the wall. With a soft hiss, the doors unlocked. As they slowly swung open, a faint glow spilled out, illuminating Ethan's calm face. "Welcome to my world," he said simply. I thought I was stepping into another part of the house, but what lay beyond those doors was another universe entirely. I expected another cold, lifeless room, maybe an office filled with dusty books and family portraits, but I was wrong. As the heavy doors swung open, a wave of warm light washed over me. The space beyond wasn't just a room. It was an entire world. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across one side, revealing the city skyline glowing in the distance. The air buzzed softly with the hum of machines. Workbenches were lined with intricate devices, robotic arms, sleek wheelchairs, unlike anything I'd seen before, and exoskeletons that looked like something from a sci-fi movie. Men and women in lab coats and business attire moved around with focused urgency. They spoke in hushed tones, pointing to diagrams on large digital screens or adjusting prototypes with delicate tools. It didn't feel like a mansion anymore. It felt like the heart of innovation. Ethan rolled forward, his hands steady on the wheels. "This is where I spend most of my time," he said quietly, as though afraid to break the spell. I trailed behind him, too stunned to speak. At a nearby table, a young engineer was testing a mechanical hand. It opened and closed with a smoothness that was almost human. "What is all this?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan stopped near a workstation, where a prototype exoskeleton stood like a silent sentinel. "This is my company," he said. "We design assistive technology devices to help people regain mobility, independence, dignity." His hand brushed the exoskeleton's frame. "I lost the use of my legs 2 years ago. The doctors said I should be grateful to be alive. But I wasn't satisfied with just surviving. I wanted to walk again. And if I couldn't, I wanted to make sure others like me had a chance." I stared at him, unsure what to say. This wasn't the bitter recluse I'd imagined. This wasn't a man wallowing in self-pity. This was someone building an empire not for power, not for wealth, but for hope. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked finally. Ethan's lips curved into a faint, almost sad smile. "Because people don't see me as a man with a mission. They see the chair, and they either pity me or dismiss me. I didn't want you to see me that way too." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. Because he was right. I had judged him long before I ever knew him. In that moment, I realized the man I married wasn't broken. He was stronger than anyone I'd ever met. Ethan's fingers traced the edge of the exoskeleton, like it was something sacred. "This is more than just steel and wires," he said softly. "It's freedom. For someone out there, this could mean standing up again after years of being confined to a chair." I stood still, watching him in the warm glow of the workshop lights. "You've built all of this?" I asked. He nodded. "With the help of brilliant engineers and designers, I had the resources. They had the genius. Together, we're trying to give people like me a second chance." I glanced at the rows of prototypes wheelchairs, so light. They seemed to float robotic arms designed to mimic human movement devices I couldn't even name. "This isn't what I expected," I admitted, Ethan turned his chair slightly, meeting my eyes. "I know what people think of me," he said calmly. "They see the wheelchair first. Then they either look away out of discomfort or look at me with pity." His voice didn't carry bitterness, just quiet certainty. "But I don't need pity, Lily. And I don't want to be admired for simply existing. If I'm going to spend the rest of my life in this chair, I'll make sure that life means something." I felt a pang in my chest, shame maybe, because he wasn't wrong. When I first agreed to this marriage, I pictured a man resentful, broken, perhaps even cruel in his frustration. But the person in front of me wasn't broken at all. He was whole, stronger than anyone I'd ever met. "Why keep all of this hidden?" I asked quietly. "You could be out there getting awards, being celebrated." "Why work in the shadows?" Ethan gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Because I don't care about the applause. I care about the work. And sometimes, building quietly in the background is the only way to get things done without distractions." There was a gravity to his words that pulled me in. For the first time since our wedding, I didn't see him as the man I was forced to marry. I saw him as someone with a purpose bigger than himself, and I wasn't sure how to feel about that. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about him, and for the first time, my curiosity felt less like defiance and more like the beginning of something I couldn't name. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lying in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind kept replaying every word Ethan had said in the East Wing. "I don't need pity. I want this life to mean something." I hadn't expected to feel this way. I came into this marriage with resentment in my heart. I had painted him as a tragic figure, locked in a chair, locked in his own bitterness. But what I saw today shattered that image. Ethan wasn't confined. He was building, creating, lifting others up in ways I could barely comprehend. And I didn't know what to do with this new version of him in my head. The next morning, I found another latte on the small table by my window. Beside it lay a folded note, in the same careful handwriting I hope yesterday didn't overwhelm you. "You're welcome to return any time. E." This time, I didn't crumple the note. I didn't drink the latte either, but I held the cup in my hands, feeling its warmth seep into my palms. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I didn't feel quite as cold as I had before. At lunch, we sat at opposite ends of the massive dining table as usual, but I caught myself glancing at him more than once. His focus never wavered as he scrolled through something on his tablet, his fingers moving with quiet precision. There was no sign of arrogance in the way he carried himself, only calm strength. "Do you ever take a break?" I asked suddenly. He looked up, surprised. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Sometimes. But when you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work." That answer shouldn't have meant anything to me. But it did. I quickly looked away, pretending to be fascinated by the painting on the far wall. As I returned to my room later, I caught my reflection in the mirror. There was a softness in my eyes I didn't recognize, and it scared me, because no matter how much I wanted to deny it, a small, fragile part of me was starting to care. I told myself I wouldn't get pulled in, but when someone believes in you more than you believe in yourself, walls begin to crumble. I didn't expect him to knock on my door again so soon. It was mid-morning, and I was curled up in the bay window, with a book I wasn't really reading. Lily. His voice, calm as ever, drifted through the wood. Yes, there's something I'd like to ask you. May I come in? I hesitated, staring at the door handle, as if it might turn on its own. All right, I said finally. Ethan entered, wheeling himself in with practiced ease. He looked sharp, as always, in a light sweater and tailored slacks. I was wondering, he began, if you'd consider helping me with a part of the project. I blinked. Me. Why? He didn't flinch at the edge in my voice. Because you're sharp. You notice things. And I need someone who can communicate our mission clearly to the outside world. What exactly are you asking? I want you to oversee outreach for one of our smaller programs. It's a campaign to get our latest mobility device into community clinics. You'd coordinate with the team, help refine the messaging, and manage initial presentations. I almost laughed. I'm not qualified for that, I said quickly. Maybe not yet, he admitted, but you can learn. You have more potential than you realize. His words caught me off guard. No one had ever spoken to me like that. Not with quiet certainty. Not as if they actually believed in me. Why are you doing this? I asked cautiously. Because I don't want you to feel like you're just existing in this house, he said simply. You deserve more than that. I stared at him, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to refuse to retreat into the safety of detachment. But another part, one I hadn't felt in years, whispered, what if he's right? The next day, I sat in the East Wing's small conference room with a team of young engineers and designers. They treated me with polite curiosity, unsure why I was there. I didn't blame them. I wasn't sure either. But as Ethan introduced me, calm, measured, completely confident, I felt something shift. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't Lily, the reluctant bride. I wasn't the girl who gave up her dreams to save her family. I was someone who could matter here. As the days passed, I began to see the world through his eyes, and slowly I started to wonder if I had been wrong about my own strength all along. It's strange how memories sneak up on you. As I sat in the quiet of my room that night, staring at the folder of documents Ethan had given me, my mind drifted backward years and miles away. I was 7, sitting cross-legged on the worn wooden floor of my family's little bookstore. My hands were stained with ink from the crayons I used to draw endless pictures of my future shop. In my sketches, there were rows of books, cozy armchairs, and a corner cafe where people would sip coffee and talk about ideas that could change the world. Back then, I believed anything was possible. Even at 16, I still carried that spark. I filled journals with plans for community programs, sketched logos for nonprofits I'd create, dreamed of a life where I'd make things better, not just for me, but for everyone around me. But life has a way of grinding down dreams. When the flood came and swept away my family's livelihood, I stopped sketching. When I signed that marriage contract, I stopped believing I had any say in what my future would look like. Now here I was, sitting in a mansion that wasn't mine, wearing a ring I never wanted, holding papers for a project I didn't ask for. And yet, for the first time in years, I felt a faint flicker of the girl I used to be. Maybe it was the way Ethan looked at me when he said, "You can learn." Or maybe it was seeing his team, their quiet dedication, their belief in the impossible, that reminded me of how I used to believe too. I wasn't strong like him, but maybe I didn't have to be perfect to matter. Maybe broken things could still build something good. The next morning, as we worked side by side for the first time, something shifted between us. Not romance. Not yet. But trust the kind that grows quietly, like roots beneath the soil. The next morning, I found myself back in the East Wing. This time, I wasn't just observing. I was part of it. Ethan introduced me to the outreach team, calmly explaining my role. No one questioned it, not because they believed I was ready, but because they trusted him. "Don't worry," he said as we reviewed documents together. "You'll catch on faster than you think." For hours we worked side by side. At first I felt awkward, hyper-aware of every word I spoke, every mistake I made. But Ethan never flinched. He answered my questions patiently, his tone steady and encouraging. When I stumbled over an email draft, he glanced at it, then at me. "You're overthinking," he said gently. "Say what you mean. That's enough." Something in the way he said it, calm but certain, made me pause. For years, I had second-guessed every step I took. Now, for the first time, I felt like someone believed I could stand on my own. By late afternoon, I was exhausted, but it wasn't the kind of exhaustion that came from hopelessness. It was the kind that felt good. As we wrapped up, Ethan leaned back in his chair, looking over at me. "You did well today." I started to dismiss it, but something about his expression stopped me. There was no hint of condescension, no patronizing smile. Just quiet sincerity. "Thanks," I murmured, unsure why my face felt warm, and then it happened. He smiled. It wasn't a big smile, not even enough to crease the corners of his eyes. But it was real. And it hit me harder than I expected. I quickly looked away, pretending to shuffle papers, but my heart was beating faster than it should have been. That night, as I lay in bed, I kept seeing that smile. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. But it wasn't nothing either. And for the first time since this marriage began, I wasn't sure how I felt about the man I was starting to see. He didn't ask for my heart. But piece by piece, I felt like I was giving it anyway. I had never been to Chicago before. As the plane descended, the city lights stretched out like a sea of stars. I pressed my forehead to the window, my breath fogging the glass. Ethan sat beside me, reading through notes on his tablet. He looked calm, collected, as if flying across the country for a major conference was just another Tuesday for him. It wasn't for me. I still wasn't sure why he wanted me here. When I asked, he said simply, "Because you've been part of this journey too, and I want you to see what it means." The next day, the conference hall was buzzing with energy. Attendees in sharp suits and elegant dresses milled about the air, thick with anticipation. As we entered, people turned. Some nodded politely at me, but most of the attention was on Ethan. He moved through the crowd in his wheelchair with quiet confidence, offering firm handshakes and measured smiles. It struck me then how people looked at him differently here. Not with pity, not with awkwardness, but with respect. When his name was announced, the applause was thunderous. I watched as he wheeled onto the stage under the golden lights, accepting the award for technological innovation in assistive devices. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. He spoke with a calm authority that filled the room, not boasting, but inspiring. "This isn't about me," he said into the microphone. "It's about everyone who's been told they can't, and proving that they can. It's about giving back dignity where it's been taken, and hope where it's been lost. My chest tightened. This was the man I married, not because I chose him, not because I loved him, but standing there I realized I was proud of him, and I wasn't sure what to do with that. Later that evening, as we left the hall, Ethan glanced at me. "You've been quiet," he said gently. I managed a small smile. "You were incredible up there." For a second, I thought I saw something shift in his eyes, something warm, almost tender. "Thank you," he murmured. That night, as we sat in the quiet of our hotel room, he asked me a question I wasn't ready for. And my heart almost stopped. The hotel room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the city below. I sat curled up on the couch, still in my dress from the conference. My heels were tossed aside, and I held a glass of water between my hands, the condensation dripping onto my fingers. Ethan sat across from me in his wheelchair, his jacket neatly folded on the armrest. For a long time, neither of us spoke. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was charged. "You surprised me tonight," I said softly. He looked up from his tablet, one eyebrow raised. "How so?" "The way you spoke, the way people listened. You have a way of pulling people in." For a moment, a faint smile touched his lips. "Most people don't see that," he said. "They see the chair and assume the man sitting in it has nothing to say." "I don't see you that way," I blurted out before I could stop myself. Our eyes met, and the air between us seemed to shift. "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I asked you to come here." The minutes passed. The city lights flickered outside the window, casting soft shadows across his face. Then he asked it, the question that made my breath catch in my throat. "If you could choose again." His voice was low, steady, but there was something fragile beneath it. "Would you still marry me?" The room seemed to shrink around me. My mind scrambled for words, but none came, because in that moment I realized how much had changed. This man, the one I had once resented, the one I saw as a symbol of everything I had lost, was no longer a stranger. He was patient, strong, kind, and somehow, somewhere along the way, he had become important to me. And I set the glass down with shaking hands. "Ethan." My voice cracked. He didn't press. He didn't look away either. He just waited. "I don't know when it happened," I whispered. "But yes, if I could choose again, I'd still say yes." His eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw the tension leave his shoulders. "Thank you," he said simply. We sat there for a while longer, saying nothing, but silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full. Later that night, I found myself standing closer to him than ever before, and when his hand brushed mine, I didn't pull away. The room felt different after I said it. If I could choose again, I'd still say yes. Ethan didn't reply right away, but I could see it in his eyes how much those words meant. For months there had been a wall between us, invisible but unyielding. And now, piece by piece, it was crumbling. I stood and walked slowly toward him. He didn't move. He just watched me, calm but searching, as if trying to read my intentions before I even knew them myself. When I stopped in front of his chair, I hesitated. This wasn't part of the deal. This wasn't part of any plan, but my heart wouldn't stop pounding. "Ethan," I said softly. "Yes." His voice was steady, but there was a flicker of vulnerability there. I reached out, letting my fingers brush his. He didn't pull away. Instead, his hand turned his palm, meeting mine, and that simple touch felt electric. I leaned down, slowly, carefully, giving him a chance to stop me. But he didn't. And when my lips met his, the world seemed to still. It wasn't a passionate kiss. Not yet. It was hesitant, tender, almost fragile, like a single match flickering in the dark. But it was enough to make my chest ache in the best way. When I finally pulled back, Ethan was looking at me as if I'd just rewritten the universe. "You didn't have to do that," he murmured. I know I whispered, but I wanted to. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about obligation anymore. This was about us. Whatever us meant now. It was real. I thought our hardest days were behind us, but the world had its own way of testing what we'd built. It started with whispers. At first, I thought I was imagining it the way people's voices dropped when I entered the room, the sideways glances at charity events, the forced smiles from women in designer dresses. But then came the headlines. Gold digger or savior, the woman who married tech mogul Ethan Hale. From small-town nobody to billionaire's wife, Lily Bennett's Cinderella story. The words burned into my mind like scars I couldn't erase. I sat at the kitchen counter one morning, my phone buzzing with notifications. My old friends from Oregon, people I hadn't heard from in years, were suddenly reaching out. Some messages were curious. "Is it true you married him for his money?" Others were cruel. "Guess you finally found a way out of that dead-end town. Must be nice to trade love for luxury." Ethan found me there an hour later, staring at the screen, my hands shaking. "You saw it," I whispered. I did. I waited for him to say more, to ask if it was true, to question my motives the way everyone else seemed to. But he didn't. Instead, he set his tablet down and wheeled closer, his expression calm but unreadable. "Lily," he said softly, "do you care what they think I don't want to?" I admitted, my voice breaking. "But it hurts. They don't know me. They don't know us. They don't need to." He reached for my hand, his fingers warm and steady against my cold ones. "They'll talk no matter what. Because it's easier for them to tear you down than to accept they might be wrong about you." I stared at him, my chest tightening. "How are you so calm?" I asked. "Because I've lived with this my whole life," he said quietly. "People have always made assumptions about me, about my worth, about what I'm capable of." He squeezed my hand gently. "Let them think what they want. You and I, we know the truth. And that's enough." His words didn't erase the pain, but they dulled the sharp edges. For the first time I realized, maybe this was what strength looked like. Not shouting back, not proving them wrong, but holding your ground and refusing to let their words define you. That day, I decided I wouldn't let them break me or us. If the world wanted a fight, they'd have to take on both of us. I used to think I was weak, that agreeing to this marriage meant I had given up all my power, all my choices. But that morning, as I watched Ethan hold my hand and shield me from the world's poison, something shifted. I wasn't the same girl who walked down the aisle 2 months ago, her heart heavy with resentment. And I wasn't about to let him fight alone. Later that week, we attended a charity gala in Seattle. It was our first public appearance since the gossip exploded. The moment we stepped into the ballroom, I felt the weight of 100 eyes on us. Some faces softened when they looked at Ethan. Others hardened when they turned to me. There she is, the gold digger. The small-town girl who trapped a billionaire in his weakest moment. Ethan, as always, looked unbothered. But I knew better now. I knew how much strength it took to hold his head high while people whispered behind his back. And this time, I wasn't going to let their stares cut into him. As we moved through the crowd, a woman in a glittering dress leaned in toward her friend, her voice dripping with disdain. She's smart. Married him right after the accident, didn't she? Perfect timing. I stopped walking. My pulse thundered in my ears. "Excuse me," I said, turning to face her. Her eyes widened, caught off guard. "You don't know me. You don't know us. And you certainly don't know what he's accomplished, despite everything he's been through." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. But the room went quiet anyway. Ethan reached for my hand, his grip firm but gentle. "Lily," he began. I shook my head. "No, I'm not letting them do this to you." In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about us. And I would fight for him the way he had fought for me from the very beginning. That night, as we stood together against the world, I realized something simple but powerful love isn't always soft. Sometimes it's steel. The ride home from the gala was quiet, not the awkward silence of strangers, the steady, comforting silence of two people who understood each other without needing words. Ethan sat beside me in the car, his hand resting lightly over mine. "You didn't have to defend me back there," he said softly. "I know. Why did you?" I turned to look at him. Really look at him. "Because you're worth it," I said. "And because I'm tired of letting other people decide who we are." His eyes softened in the dim glow of the streetlights. "You know," he said, his voice low, "when I first married you, I thought I'd spend my life shielding you from the world." He gave a small, rueful smile. "I never imagined you'd be the one shielding me. C'est effort." When we got back to the mansion, the staff greeted us with their usual polite smiles. But I didn't feel like a guest anymore. This was home now. Not because of the walls, or the chandeliers, or the manicured gardens, but because of him. The next morning, we appeared on the front page again. But this time, the photo wasn't a tabloid smear. It was us, standing together at the gala hand in hand, heads held high. The headline read, "They look like a team," and for the first time, that felt true. Later that day, Ethan and I walked through the East Wing together. As we passed the rows of prototypes and glowing screens, he stopped and turned to me. "We've both been through enough judgment to last a lifetime," he said quietly. "But as long as we face it together, I think we can handle whatever comes next." I reached for his hand. "We're stronger than they think," I whispered. He smiled, then not the reserved, polite smile he used in public, but the rare, unguarded one I'd come to cherish. "Yes," he said softly. "Stronger than we think, too." Years later, people still whispered about how our story began. But what mattered wasn't how it started. It was how we built something beautiful out of nothing. 5 years. It feels like a lifetime. And yet sometimes I still catch myself staring at Ethan and wondering how we got here. We're no longer the awkward strangers who signed a marriage contract out of desperation. We're partners now in life and love, in building something bigger than ourselves. Together, we've grown Hale Technologies into a global force for good. Our mobility devices and assistive technologies are now in clinics across 20 countries. We've given thousands of people the chance to walk, to move, to live fully again. But beyond the headlines and awards, the greatest thing we built was us. And this morning, as I walked through the glass-walled offices of our Seattle headquarters, I watched our team hard at work. The young engineers who once eyed me with polite skepticism now greet me with respect. They know I belong here, not because of Ethan's name, but because I've earned my place. I've grown into the role he once said I could handle, back when I doubted everything about myself. When I step into Ethan's office, he's at his desk reviewing a proposal. He looks up, and the faint smile that spreads across his face still makes my heart skip. "Morning," I say softly. "Morning, Mrs. Hale." I roll my eyes playfully at the formality, and he chuckles. 5 years ago, I didn't think love like this was possible. Not for me, not for us. But here we are, still standing, still growing, still choosing each other every single day. Sometimes people ask if we regret how our story began, and the answer is always the same. No, because we took something broken and turned it into something beautiful. That evening, as the city lights glowed around us, Ethan reached for my hand and whispered the words that still made my heart ache in the best way. That night, the city glowed outside our apartment windows, Seattle's skyline glittering like 1,000 scattered stars. Ethan and I sat together on the balcony, wrapped in a shared blanket. The air was cool, but his hand in mine kept me warm. For a long while, we didn't speak. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence only two people who know each other's hearts can share. "I used to think I didn't deserve this," I said quietly. "This life, this love." Ethan turned to me, his eyes soft in the dim light. "You do," he said simply. "You always have." For a moment, I studied his face, the faint lines around his eyes from years of smiling, the strength in his jaws that had once seemed intimidating, but now felt like home. 5 years ago, I thought I was saving my family by marrying him. I never imagined he'd be the one to save me. "Ethan," I murmured. "Yes. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? If we hadn't met, his grip on my hand tightened just slightly. All the time, he admitted. And I thank God every day that we did." He paused, his gaze drifting to the city lights. "You know," he said slowly, "there were days after the accident when I wanted to disappear. I thought I'd lost everything. My freedom, my purpose, my worth. I stayed quiet, letting him speak. Then you came along, and you didn't just marry me. You stayed, even when you didn't have to, even when it would have been easier to walk away." He turned back to me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "Lily, you saved me too." In the words settled in my chest like a warm weight. I reached up, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "I didn't save you," I whispered. "We saved each other." A small smile tugged at his lips, the kind of smile that made all the pain, all the struggles feel worth it. Years from now, people would still ask how we survived it all. But the truth was simple. We never gave up on each other. Years from now, people will still whisper about us. They'll say I married him for his fortune. They'll say he kept me because he had no choice. They'll never understand how wrong they are. But that's all right, because this love was never meant for the world to dissect. It was ours. Ethan and I sit on the same balcony, where we've spent countless nights watching the city breathe beneath us. His hand finds mine fingers intertwining effortlessly. After all these years, that simple gesture still makes my heart ache in the best possible way. "We've come a long way," I say softly. "We have," he agrees. I glance down at our hands, his larger, stronger, scarred in places I'll never ask about. Mine smaller, but just as steady now. "Do you ever wonder why it worked?" I ask. Ethan is quiet for a moment before answering. "Because we stopped trying to fix each other," he says, and started holding on instead. I smile faintly, my thumb brushing over his knuckles. They say true love is grand, loud, overwhelming, but I've learned that isn't always true. Sometimes real love is quiet. It's the steady presence at your side when the world is falling apart. It's the hand that reaches for yours not because it has to, but because it wants to. It's the choice you make every single day to stay. As the city lights blur and the night wraps around us like a soft blanket, I realize something simple but powerful. We didn't save each other. We built something stronger. The camera lingers on our hands, fingers intertwined, unshakable. And slowly the frame fades to black. Love isn't about perfection or fairy tales. It's about two people broken in their own ways, choosing to hold on anyway. And once that kind of love takes root, it never lets go.